Hello and welcome to the aForm show. My name is Alan George and thank you very much for tuning in. Each week, we sit across from thought leaders and change makers in the architecture and design space of the GCC. We dive deep into their experiences, both professionally and personally, and share their valuable insight as to what makes them tick. Our goal is to add value to your day and help you navigate your own personal creative journey. Finally, the opinions and the views of the guest speakers are that of their own. They do not necessarily represent the views and the opinions of the show or the host. Hello everyone. This week we are joined by Adnan Ihsan. He has been a part of and delivered multiple projects across New York, LA, Dubai, and East Asia. Currently, Adnan is a design team lead at RSP. He has a passion for design and is clearly reflected in some of his love for sketching. Adnan is a regular visiting crit at many universities and is known for sharing his expertise with passionate students. A lot to cover in this episode, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Right. Alan, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's a great podcast and I've heard a few of your series. It's fantastic what you're doing over here. So just happy to be here.
Well, for our listeners who can't see, but I am bowing. Thank you so much for those lovely words. Adnan, obviously we've met a couple of times before at crits and things like that. And you've always come off as a very approachable person, which is kind of why I wanted you on this show ASAP. But then the more we sort of researched you and found out about your profile and your background and so on, I'm quite curious about this process of sketching, which you are actually one of the few designers which I see take it very seriously. And it's kind of not just a hobby and it's not just, something you do pre-concept, but it actually runs through the entire process of design. So kind of to start us off, I'm curious as to what is your design workflow once you get a brief?
So it's interesting that you touched on sketching and I am keen on it and I always enjoy it. And most architects do enjoy sketching a lot. But just to run you through, once we get the design brief and we've narrowed it down, what are the parameters of this design? I generally like to do a lot of what I call the shotgun approach. It is just shooting out a lot of ideas out there in the form of sketches, hand sketches, 3D sketches, images, and things of that nature. But hand sketching is really close to my heart because I feel that the relationship of mine to paper or to a digital screen is just so quick and to the point. And just for the audience's sake, I want to create this description for sketch is different from drawing because people often confuse drawing with sketch. A drawing is a baked sort of a piece of information which can be pretty, but a sketch is an intent. It's a complete, quick interpretation in a series of lines, just the original intent that the person wants to put forward. It does not have to be pretty. And that's a common misconception, like when people say, oh, it has to be beautiful. Not really. If it gets the idea across in terms of few lines, few circles, or some geometry, and it serves the purpose of explaining what it's trying to do. That's it. That's a sketch. And the life of a sketch is basically a day. So it shouldn't be precious. Whereas a drawing or an artwork is very precious. So now that I've given a bit of a background on sketching, that's why I do sketching a lot. Because sketching has to be quick. It has to communicate effectively. What are you trying to explain? It's not a beautiful drawing. It should not look beautiful. If it does, that's a bonus, but it doesn't need to. Just to give you a background, I've got my master's in advanced architectural design from Columbia University, New York. And back there, 10 years ago, I was doing a lot of scripting and writing scripts through Grasshopper, ETL scripts, CATIA, digital craft. I was in this mode that this is the future and will get me new ideas. But what I've realized as I matured as an architect is that our architect is basically the curator. And the best way till now is the Da Vinci way, basically, just to draw it out. You can carry that black book and you sketch it out, quick ideas. And like I said, they don't have to be pretty. And that's been very successful for me throughout so far, that I've been able to communicate with my team, with the client, a lot of multiple ideas very quickly. So that's very important for me, especially the stages I work in. It's mostly concept, front-end ideation. And in that time, you have a very short period of time. And you need to produce a lot of data and information for people to react, for you to actually, take it and sculpt it into a nice project. So just going back, my process is basically get the design brief, do the shotgun approach where you have a lot of sketches, a lot of 3D models, get a lot of minds involved into the process. And that can vary from an intern to a director. So there's a gap of 20 years of experience. But actually, when we sit on a table, there is no gap. So anybody can come up with a good idea. It's just how the experience hones it and sculpts it and beautifully in a pragmatic way. So we all sit down and just go through all the options that we have and then start to narrow it down into a certain focus. Some of them, they are more into an iconic sort of vision, and then we kind of put them in that basket. Some of them are more driven on sustainable pragmatism sort of an idea, so we put them in that sort of a basket. And some of them are driven by mathematics. So once we have tailored them into a few categories, it helps us to actually present it to the client and that, this is a design problem you gave us. And there is no one solution to it. There are varied solutions which have certain biases. Now it's up to the client's discretion. What's the bias? What's the preference he has? And if he prefers a much more humane sort of people-oriented, human-centric sort of a design, then it's at his discretion, basically, what he does. But our job, I feel, is to serve the industry, to serve the client for what he has come to us. And he's come to us with a piece of land, a blank canvas, and told us that here are the parameters and what do you have to offer. So we have to just facilitate him with a great vision that supports his ideas, basically.
Right. That's very interesting, especially considering, like you touched upon, where you sort of started during your post-graduation with scripting, which is obviously inherently a very digital sort of means of communication. And then, of course, you have now sketching, which is a lot more analog, but then I completely agree, a lot more faster. I think the whole connection from mind to hand is just really, really quick. And I think what was key that you touched upon is that sketching is actually more of a function. It's more of a task. It's not really, which is something to just tick a box. You're actually thinking through it. It's kind of a form of, it's an action rather of exploring a certain idea, which I think is very good, because especially with young graduates, they seem to have this perception that, they probably must have seen a sketch of, Frank Gehry or something and thought, oh, this is what a sketch should be like, or, something of Calatrava, which is proper watercolors and all of that, which it can be. It's not that it does not, but I think all of them do it with the same purpose, that it be functional. Having said that, I think a very interesting kind of gap now that we can talk about, which maybe someone like yourself is perfect to address, is definitely the metaverse. Kind of this whole, is it digital? Is it analog? Is it here? Is it not here? I believe you're already working on a project that's in the metaverse. So for our audience who probably has heard about it, has some working knowledge of it, but doesn't really know what it's about and how it operates, could you maybe give us what your keen insights would be?
That's a great question, Alan, because it is a hot topic these days, metaverse. And just for the audience sake, in simple terms, metaverse is a virtual world, basically, where people get together and do activities that they would like to do. That comes down to socializing, just being together. And that can take different formats, basically playing games, hanging out, doing a yoga session, or things that they would normally do in real life that they can do in a virtual life. Now, it just comes down to the idea like, why is this happening? Or how did this happen? Where did it come from?
Right.
So it's not something new, actually, the metaverse. Neil Stephenson actually had a novel called Snow Crash in 1992, and he coined this word metaverse, where the protagonist has an alter ego. He becomes a samurai. So this word has been there of just a second life, an idea of that. Then we've gone through a lot of media, such as movies, The Matrix, Ready Player One, TV shows like Black Mirror, which has actually dabbled upon this idea of technology and being fully immersed in a reality of that. And even in video games, there's Minecraft, there are Fortnite, games like that, where there's a hint of metaverse, basically. Now, what is happening is, why is it all of a sudden that it's become such a hot topic? And I think we lend ourselves to the COVID-19 pandemic that happened. Now, when this happened, unfortunately, the prescription that was given to us was social isolation. And because of that, nobody was going to school. Nobody was going to work. Malls were empty. Stadiums were empty. Bars were empty. And given that human beings, by default, are social creatures, and now that was taken away from us. So slowly, people started finding value in the digital space. And whatever digital space we had, we made the most out of it. Now, for that sort of a social experience, I think what we have so far is backward. And that's why this is getting invented. So people would spend time on Facebook, people spend time in Zoom calls, people would spend time on Instagram, just trying to connect. And they found some solace and some sort of a connection, the social activity through that. And that's what actually accelerated the whole idea of the value of digital space, which we are calling metaverse. It's just a virtual space for people to get together. Now, this space has predominantly been gamers because they have already taken over the space. So they have had the first cut added. And what's happening is because of the COVID, people started using the digital space for other reasons, such as, just to meet family, just to talk to them, just to be at an alumni sort of a dinner party, which they couldn't go because the flights were locked, or they couldn't meet the dear ones. So this is where the whole invention of we need a digital alternate for us to connect and gives us a fully immersive experience like the world does. And just mind you that the depression rates actually increased quite a bit during the COVID. And that was all led to social isolation. People could not meet. So what if there is an outlet? Because there's a lot of skepticism about, we don't want to do this because the digital space. I would say that people need to have an open mind. And they are actually already part of it because they are using Zoom calls. They are doing FaceTime and Snapchat and things like that. So they are already part of it. The only difference that's going to happen with the metaverse is you will be living in the internet rather than being on the internet. So this 2D phone would actually translate into a much more immersive 3D experience. And I think people would really enjoy that. So, and that's in a nutshell, that's what it is. And then it comes down to, all right, it is there. Then what are we architects supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
What's our business in this?
Yeah,
right?
like what's our role in this environment? I mean, it seems like such a obvious answer, but such a confusing one at the same time.
And then that's been coming up quite recently. Like we do already have things like Roblox, Sandbox. People are already there. There are some concerts happening. So do they really need us? They don't need us? That's a very interesting question. And I definitely think that world needs us. Why? Because it's been predominantly a gamer's sort of curation, where it's been curated through the experience of gamers, like jumping, collecting points and collecting trophies, going to battlefields, things like that. But now that people who don't want to play games still want to be part of it so that they can connect with friends and people and do things that they couldn't do or afford, then that's when architects come in. And now by architects, I think we maybe remind ourselves what's the definition of what we do. So basically, in a nutshell, we are the curators of experiences in built environment. Now I would emphasize that built environment, right? Now, before it gets into a built environment, every architect has it in a virtual environment. It is in a form of a 3D model, drawings and sketches that sits on somebody's hard drive or maybe up in the cloud, right? So we are already sort of halfway through. We do design it virtually, and then we have ran our clients through virtual images and through Oculus goggles that they're more immersive within the experiences. So the thing is, what architects also do is they create a framework. They create a framework for school. They create a framework for retail. They create a framework for offices. They create a framework for how people would live. And whereas gaming is just one framework, and there's certain people who do it very well. But the moment we enter the industry, I think we can do a lot of benefit and open up the boundaries and make it more inviting for people to come in.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, again, I guess a very obvious question because a lot of our audience are designers themselves. So where does one start? I mean, obviously everyone needs to do their own homework and, kind of educate yourself, no doubt. But if, say, someone wants to actually experience this metaverse, what would be kind of your 1, 2, 3 steps to figure it out?
So there is no one metaverse at this point, right? So everybody is just figuring it out like you and me. And for anybody to jump into this, I would just say it's very easy. First of all, you can go to, for instance, one of the most popular metaverses, Decentraland. And you can go on the website, create an avatar and log in and just start running around. Other ways is to just start playing some video games. Not everybody has that, but a video game would be a good start. But if not, then they can always go into a Decentraland and just plug themselves in. And so what is it like? Try to have a conference meeting through platforms by Microsoft and all that. You have avatars with your face on it. It does look very rudimentary in terms of graphics. I think the industry still needs to develop on that. But the fact that the experience is more real, rather than reading through a text, you're actually in a room with somebody. You can see their face, you can see their emotions, you can move around, you can go through an art gallery with them and go through the artwork in the same space, rather than people taking the iPad and putting the videos on. That's one way. So people are struggling. There is a need for a technology like that. There is a need for people to be part of an environment where they can be digitally together, right? Which is not there. And it's very simple. It's just people just have to go online and look into any of these metaverses which are out there. All it comes down to is creating an avatar and just logging in, and just running around and have fun with it.
Right. Do you think us as designers will kind of have to relearn or forget or adapt or something? Because I would think that if you are now going to design for the metaverse, I mean, basic things like gravity and cantilever spans and, egress routes and things like that, which I guess all of us kind of have now ingrained in us, which obviously don't matter in the metaverse. I was hearing you speak very recently wherein there was also a talk about, do developments even need areas like back of house and washrooms and things like that? So I found that very interesting because that obviously challenges a lot of perception and a lot of ways that we approach design. So what is your take on that? Do you think we need to kind of re-educate ourselves or forget or learn more, or what do you think?
Definitely. We currently have a project in Decentraland, which is an NFT gallery, and we're learning as I'm talking to you. There's so many questions, unresolved things, because it's uncharted territory so far, right? For beginners, there are certain parameters that don't exist in that world, which makes it super fascinating for architects, right? One is there's no gravity involved. You don't need any engineering because people don't breathe real air, right? And then there's no environment as is it hot or cold in there. So there's no need for solid engineering as such, MEP, air conditioning. There can't be fire where people can die in there. So there are no unfortunate circumstances that can happen, like the Great London Fire or the Chicago fires. But because of that, you don't need fire life and safety. And there's a lot of these codes and parameters that are stuck on to the architecture to make it safe, to make it habitable, which actually are not required there anymore. So it makes a much purer autonomy to design, so that people can just design it as they imagine the experience of the space to be, rather than a column needed in the middle of the space or things of that nature. Another thing that comes to my mind is the materiality. Every architect's nightmare is when they go through a process and then the word VE, value engineering, gets thrown in the mix. It's like, all right, it's getting too expensive and we can't afford this, so let's tone down the materials. So natural stone goes all the way down to porcelain or ceramic tile, or even worse, that might become just a paint job.
Right.
And for an architect, it's soul crushing, to be honest. But the fact over there is we can use the materials as we desire them to be, and people can afford it. So definitely there's a new way to look at architecture when we design it over there. And the fact that there's no gravity, then do we need the buildings to be settled as they were, or can they be floating? And then how do we design those spaces for them? But mind you, right now, still the characters, the avatars that move around the space, gravity applies to them. So they'll be walking, running, but they are stuck to the ground. They can jump, maybe do higher jumps, but the gravity still applies to them. Not to the architecture and built environment, but to them it does. But the nice thing is people never get tired. That works, so they can run forever. So the fact that people have stairways to heaven and sort of thing idea, and then they would go on forever, and the question would come, who's going to climb the set of stairs? We need an elevator. We don't need an elevator anymore, right?
Right.
Yeah. So the idea is like, they can run forever if they want to jump around. But then also brings to the idea that people get bored very quickly. There's a lot to see very quickly.
Right.
That they don't immerse themselves into that sort of an experience. But just coming to, in terms of building, yes, they are just completely new set of parameters where elevators are not needed or the fire codes don't apply here. And in terms of our relationship with the industry is now evolving, because previously architects would partner up with engineers and fire life and safety consultants, VD transportations, and structure, mechanical, all those sort of things that would be required to build an architecture. But that's not required anymore. But now our collaborations are changing. We have to collaborate with UX designers, user experience designers, basically,
Right.
because they understand digital experiences much better. We need to collaborate with coders who can code and give us the functions that we're looking for. For instance, if you do require a platform or floor to be moving up and down or rotating, then architects at this point were never used to doing these things and don't have the knowledge of know-how. But the game designers have been doing this for so many years now. So for them, it's very easy to do that. So our collaborations is right now changing with them. So we're working with more game coders. We're working more with UX designers, because at the end, people would go there. They need to socialize. They need to have some commercial aspect to it. Like if they want to purchase, or they want to go to your LinkedIn profile or things like that.
Right.
How do they get there? So there's some parameters of that. But other things like car parking, things like that, we don't really need them in that space. So it's really a completely different world. And I would think for creative designers, it's a paradise right now, because it's a clean slate with no strings attached.
Right.
But just to, I did touch on that there are no strings attached, but there is at this point a certain restraint, which I would say is the value engineering aspect of digital universe, which is polygon count. That's what we're facing right now. So when it comes down to how much you can design in that, you can go crazy, but not so crazy, because there's a limit to how much polygon counts you can put into that work. But I think very quickly this problem would get resolved, because there are a lot of big companies interested in this, and they will make it happen. How more data can be processed very quickly in a cloud-based environment.
Right. I think you kind of touched upon exactly what I was thinking about. Maybe you could read my mind. I don't know. But just to give a bit of context. So one of my favorite spaces ever is the Barcelona Pavilion by Mies van der Rohe. It's obviously a very serene space. It's obviously a very low polygon count space. And it's a space where I personally can probably spend half a day easily. However, I can see a space like that not translating as well in somewhere like the metaverse, because it probably needs to be a lot more hyper interactive, or it needs to kind of touch a lot of senses very quickly, and probably needs to be something very different. So I guess my question is, from, again, a design philosophical point of view, do you think there's going to be room for spaces like the Barcelona Pavilion in a place like the metaverse? Do you think that's actually going to be somewhere where people would want to go to?
It's a very interesting question, because we ourselves are having this conversation with the like-minded people that, does the metaverse needs to replicate the real world, or does it needs to have its own sort of identity because of the nature of the parameters are different, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel it's going to be both. It's going to be a mix of both. Now, what sort of things would we like to bring into the metaverse is the question we need to ask ourselves. For instance, the capsule tower in Japan. Yeah, I think Kishore Kurokawa.
Yes.
And they've decided to tear it down. Right. So and this is one of the most avant-garde examples of metabolist movement.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. It's a shame. It breaks my heart for something so revolutionary, like a tower that could change. It was so ahead of its time that, an adaptable tower, where all the rooms are capsules and they can be
added on, removed.
As the world changes, as humans advance, they can change this capsule. But unfortunately, it worked beautifully in theory. It even got built, but the whole idea never worked. Actually, nobody ever replaced those capsules. Now it's been taken out. So I think things like that, which of historic importance, should be there. And I think it will become an interesting learning tool, because I think the metaverse will have a certain aspects to it. First is the gaming, the commercial aspect of being able to buy things, this entertainment aspects where you can have concerts and things of that nature. But the topic I want to touch on right now is the learning aspect of metaverse. But imagine that instead of reading through a book about Kishore Kurokawa's Nagakin Tower,
Exactly.
you could actually go take a whole class with you, Architecture History 101, and take them into a metaverse environment where they can actually feel this at real scale and do a site walk. And maybe be able to change the capsules yourself because it won't cost you anything. It might be part of the ticket price. The pyramids, maybe take people back hundreds of years where they can actually see the way it's getting built in a much more immersive environment. I think the absorption rate of knowledge would be so much higher because you were really immersed in how things were happening. Rather than reading it through a book or watching a YouTube video, it becomes way more immersive. And for that reason, I think we do require a certain aspects of the pioneers of our industry to conserve them, actually, right? As the space gets less and less on this planet, maybe we can retain that ideas or how the humanity actually progress and keep those notions alive in the metaverse.
Right. I think you touched upon something very important, which a lot of clients and developers maybe are also wondering about. Obviously, we're talking about it from a design point of view, but I think a lot of clients thinking, what's the ROI on this? How do I make money on this? Are people actually going to spend crypto or whatever it may be, the form of transaction? And I think you touched upon that very well. That's a very good example of how an investment into kind of remodeling perhaps the capsule tower and ticketing it, that is a form of revenue, and a very good one, I would think, as well, with pretty much next to no cost if you compare it to actually building the real thing in the real world, which I think is fascinating. Kind of to go a bit more macro again. So from your research, again, this is all in its infancy and we're all just taking our best guesses at the moment, but do you think it's ever going to be something which it's only going to be the metaverse or it's only going to be reality? Or is there going to be kind of these two worlds, these digital twins kind of existing in parallel with each other?
I think it's going to be, we cannot get rid of the real world. I think it's just far too precious. This is where we were born, where we were plugged in. I think they will coexist and will just become an extension to reality, in my opinion. It will have a new series of experiences which were not there. It's like I said, before the invention of smartphones, there were certain experiences that never existed. Right. The idea of being able to post picture globally that anybody can look at it. The idea of somebody like Elon Musk being able to tweet and connect with the whole world, and at the same time, people being able to respond to that and connect back at him with a celebrity. So there are new industries, new notions of connectivity between people that was given birth through technology. And I see the same way. The real world will continue to prosper, but at the same time, there's a parallel digital immersive environment industry that's going to grow, and it will take a life of its own where people can actually engage with it.
Okay, very interesting. Because I'm again thinking of the project that you mentioned, kind of this NFT gallery. And obviously, if you were to design a gallery in the real world, there are many parameters, lighting obviously being a key one, fire, egress, just public spacing, and a lot of, again, technical stuff which maybe doesn't apply there. So I know maybe you can't share a lot at this point, but I'm just fascinated as to what were the kind of insights that you found out when you were given this kind of brief.
So what was really fascinating, we always start a process with the brief and then do a research. So the brief was really small. It said we need an NFT gallery. And us being architects, we took it through the whole process. So we did research and we saw what's being built there. And again, these were done by very young minds, actually. So they were not experienced enough. Whereas architects are trained to create spaces, like I've said before. And the biggest thing for us is keeping people at the center of every space or design that we do, because at the end of the day, it's meant to be experienced by them. And the design we're doing for the NFT gallery, again, it was designed in a sense that it's more than just a gallery viewing space. It became a place where people could come together. So we started designing different moments and opportunities for people to come and engage. There is a Vauxhall Plaza, we have it over there, which is, again, a very exciting sort of a playground space within that. And then within where people can come and gather. And within that is a secret gallery. So there's some sort of a gamifying it. So we're borrowing some of the ideas from the existing industry, where people who are actually the users of metaverse at this point are used to finding some sort of gamification to it. So it keeps them excited and tuned in. So there's a secret portals, there are hidden chambers. You can teleport yourself. Levitation is an idea that we're borrowing. So there are different experiences and how people move through or navigate through the space that's there. And then, of course, the architecture itself is a moving architecture. I'd say it's a moving architecture because we can afford to do that, and we can afford to do that. And it's just a matter of coding in the X, Y, Z's in there, whereas it might be very expensive and in the real world. And it becomes affordable. But then to be in a space which is continuously moving or adapting to the environment or the needs of the space is something which has theoretically been spoken about. But the metaverse actually gives us the platform and the canvas to actually build it and let people experience it. So, for us, that's been really exciting.
Okay. I have two questions. The first one is more for selfish one. Think of it kind of as just my learning. Again, I can't help but kind of, put my project manager, design manager hat on and just think about how this would flow as a project. So I'm just trying to understand conventionally, again, in the real world, you have the whole concept schematic, DD, tender, post-tender, construction, and so on. It's a process and it's quite a lengthy one. It seems in the metaverse that this would pretty much not exist. I mean, there is coordination, like you said, with, game designers and so on. But I'm kind of thinking that you're pretty much designing in real time and pretty much building and constructing in real time. In a sense, you could finish, quote unquote, a plaza, open that and still continue working on something else while people interact with that. Is this a correct understanding?
So, Alan, you touched on something I want to discuss, actually. The nature of, is the shorter cycle.
Yeah.
I say the stages are less within this. So you do start with an idea and the concept of how the experiences you want to create. We start with that, the experiences you want to create within the space, and you talk to the client about it. And once the client says, yes, I would like all those things to happen. So NFT gallery is just one experience. There was more about event spaces, concerts happening, people playing, hidden galleries, discovering new things, teleportation. There were more experiences that we added on to that. And so, sorry, go back to your question.
My question was, obviously timelines change. And because timelines change, the way that projects are constructed also changes.
Right.
So what I meant to say is traditionally a project here would need a certain stage of completion in order for it to be opened, but maybe that doesn't apply in the metaverse. So it's a lot more real time.
Yes. So the projects, the way they're constructed and the way we're thinking about it is more of it's a shorter stage project, but then it's a subscription-based projects where they're continuously being updated because we can update it so quickly.
Right.
The idea is you have an ideation and then there's modeling and there's a quick testing on live site rather than having to wait for it to get built and get all the funding and get all the science involved in it. But we can really quickly test it live with people within the space. And as we get feedback from them, we can continuously upgrade it. So I think the relationship of the architect with the client is changing in a way that once you would finish a product, a piece of architecture in space, then you would continue the relationship with the client with a new project. But with this, the nature it's happening is something similar to a subscription-based model where maybe you are like a Netflix and then you constantly keep on updating the TV shows that gonna come on it. So we do an experience design and we constantly keep on changing the experiences as it evolves. Maybe he doesn't want it to be an NFT gallery anymore and becomes maybe a gaming Mario Kart sort of a space in there. So we just change that sort of a flow into that. Maybe the plaza kind of transforms to another sort of an event space. And there are different times of the year, different things would be happening that could be tied into the location, to the culture. So we can constantly keep on updating the model based on the requirements of the client. And then he can keep this relationship for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and as long as he likes to subscribe it. So it's a completely new way of working with the client. which we're not sure, but I think this is where it's heading towards.
Right. Very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, it just changes so many things, which is very interesting. Kind of like my last question, I guess, on this matter so far. Maybe not, but obviously, there's a lot of architects and designers listening to us right now who are obviously very enthusiastic about the metaverse, but do not have a project in the metaverse, are probably thinking about how they can participate, be involved. Is this a place where they can showcase their work? Is it a case where they can build a portfolio in or something like that? I guess my question is, for designers that aren't involved in the metaverse just yet, what should they be doing or learning or interacting with at this point?
I think designers, first of all, need to start engaging with the metaverse. So become part of it. And like I said, it would not cost you anything to go and have a spin around Decentraland or any of these other metaverses, the popular ones, and then that's the way to connect with people who are actually interested in that digital space. Right. And a lot of our clientele, which is interested in building something in the metaverse, are people who have originally been a lot more involved in video games.
Right.
So from video games, there was a evolution of video games into a social aspect where people would get together and do skirmishes or things like that together. And within that, they found bondage. Within that, they discovered each other. And within that was basically a social networking event, which is happening on a digital platform. And I think that's the place to actually start with. And once you go into that spaces, you interact with people, you'll find people who would say, oh, I really want to do something, but I don't know how to build that. Like you're saying, oh, I don't know where to find a client from, but who would actually commission something to do there. There are people out there who are saying, I don't know how to build something like that, but I really want to build a cool cinema where I can come with my family and we can all watch a movie because my whole family is all over the world. And then that's how people connect. So right now, I think the connections are basically happening in the digital space. So people just need to maybe play some more video games, right? But that's basically our responsibility also at this point, that to spread the word, to talk about it, not be shy about it. I think people are apprehensive about this sort of dystopic idea behind technology taking over. But I think it's just an extension of experiences. So people should embrace it. The sooner they engage, the sooner they will find opportunities around it. And then it's both parties, actually, the consultants who want to provide a service and people who actually want to create experiences in the digital world. They both need to engage with the metaverses at this point. So then there'll be opportunities to meet. And we are actually trying to create these platforms which are more than just a gaming sort of environments, but they are social platforms. Like, for instance, I mentioned about the plaza, the Vauxhall Plaza, is the opportunity for people to actually gather around and engage with each other. And there is also the beauty of metaverse is people might be scared about talking to strangers, right? And but in the digital world, that people should not fear about any of that,
right?
Because at the end of the day, it's a digital avatar, and the moment you take those goggles off, you're unplugged.
Right.
So that's there. So I think people will be more encouraged to talk to each other who are just naturally shy. They find their confidence in a digital avatar. So I think it's a great way and for people to connect, and this would happen.
Okay, very interesting. I mean, this is something which obviously the both of us can talk about indefinitely. So I kind of, as we reach the end of the episode, kind of want to dial it back to the real world, if I may. I'm curious for someone like yourself, because obviously you've had exposure across multiple markets, the metaverse clearly. I'm kind of trying to basically understand at this point of time, is there a design problem or a design solution or just something, maybe a typology or something like that, which currently you're sort of thinking about? It's kind of cooking on the back burner of your subconscious mind almost. Anything like that, which is interesting, which our listeners may want to hear about?
So, Alan, there are two aspects to the digital world, which I want to highlight in this podcast of yours. All right. The first is, again, the whole idea of entertainment and leisure is going to go to a next level.
Right.
And us as architects and designers and visionaries, we are having a ball at it. And what can we do when all these parameters of which would bog us down are not going to be there? What is the new form of leisure? How do we, and entertainment which is there in that space? Now, having said that, the problem is every person individually is operating by themselves as a rogue agent.
Right.
And there are no regulations, there are no authorities, and they're developing as we're going for spaces in general. So the problem which is coming is somebody has put a staircase which is adjacent to an open plot that nobody's built yet. And then the guy comes and he builds a plot next day, and then his entrance is totally blocked. Yeah, so these things are because there's no regulation like setbacks and things of that nature that would come during a master plan are not there. And that's why the metaverse badly needs architects, master planners, designers, and some regulatory authority that will actually sculpt it into a beautiful space for people to actually go there, rather than it becoming a very Disneylandish sort of a space, which is not a good experience at all. So it has to be curated in a way by professionals and not by really young minds who don't have enough experience to do these things. Because that's the biggest challenge we face right now, that if somebody goes in there, they get really discouraged because everybody has access to it and it's very easy to put a model in that space. So I think people will start to take some ownership of that overall master planning, let's say. So I think architecture and master planning is one of the oldest professions, right? So it's needed. It's needed even in the virtual space. Somebody has to curate the overall experiences, and then people start coming and plugging in according to some parameters. Otherwise, it is a bit of a wild west right now. Because even in the game design industry, it is designed. There's like a lot of, there are art directors involved in them. There are architects actually involved in game design because they have the keen understanding of lighting, shadow, architecture, and then the
spatial design.
Absolutely. Which is right now not there. And so metaverses are just an open canvases for people to do anything they want. But if it's borrowed from certain games, but the games were also curated and there are certain parameters. But for us, the important thing is to get those regulations in, free it up a little bit more. We need to really educate ourselves on how do we design that, because we hit a lot of roadblocks in a sense that we don't have the technical know-how to do certain things that we want to. It goes back to that your imagination and it can take you out there and then you can sketch it out. But then to implement it on a virtual site also requires a lot of knowledge and expertise from other parties that we need to learn. So if architects are going to go into there, they will have to learn other softwares like Blender or and coding, SDK coding is there to make certain things do behave in a certain way. That's kind of where it is. But having said that, I would say that metaverse is serious. It's going to touch everybody's lives in the coming years. And to tell you how serious it's getting, Microsoft has bought Activision and Blizzard for $70 billion. Google invested $35.9 million into private equity firms catered towards metaverse. So when you see these tech giants actually putting so much of their money, investing into it, build these environments, so they strongly believe in that. So it is going to move. It is going to happen. And we are probably in the gray right now. We don't know what's happening. I think there's a lot of faith and trust that's been put into this metaverse. It's going to happen. It is the future. It will touch everybody's life.
Right. I think that's the perfect sort of conclusion to our episode, because it is exactly that. You know, whether you love it, hate it, are uninformed or overly informed on it, it is undeniable that it is going to impact, especially, you know, designers. We are kind of at the forefront of all of this. So for sure, absolutely.
Just one more thing I wanted to add.
Sure.
So there are certain aspects to which I spoke about, the experiences and the gaming. There is an aspect of an economy that will get generated, that will create jobs actually. So that's why the metaverse is not just a game, because it's gonna give people a purpose in life. It's gonna give people a way to earn a money to run a household. So that's why it will become important and will become part of the future. Maybe I'll take a very high-end example where Scott Travis actually had a concert in Fortnite, and he made $20 million worth of sales in that one concert in Fortnite. And one of his regular ones in the real world would fetch him as much as like a 1.8 million. And despite that, there might be some casualties or stampedes, because in one concert, the people actually, there were unfortunately some deaths in there because of a stampede. But in the metaverse, he ended up making more money in that. And also, I would like to add, like, if you go back to the gaming model, which is a very, with the blinders on, it's just a very segment of the overall metaverse that we imagine to happen, because there'll be other segments of industry that will pop into that space. Right now, there's a microeconomy that's been created within the gaming. People take their avatars to run around and they finish off a mission and they get experience points, for example. And those experience points help you upgrade your gear. Right. So you can get a better sword, or maybe better clothes or shoes, or a better car, or some superpowers. And then when these avatars are built to at a very high level, which are like a super avatars with all these new gadgets, they go into a marketplace where people are selling them, right, and there are people who are buying them. So there is an economy that's been created and not overly regulated. There is some regulation happening, but people have found a way to talk to each other and create an economy. And I think it's because of that economy factor the metaverse would happen.
Right. It's almost like they then start investing in assets almost. I mean, very much like you would, I guess, in the real world as well.
So like people will want us to create a platform, an experience for a concert.
Right.
And then people come and do the concert. And the concert basically becomes an NFT. It's a one time and people can just purchase it, a portion of it. And then after that's gone, it's gone. So the ticket that you had, an online ticket, cannot be replicated because it was minted as an NFT.
Right.
So that's a different conversation.
Exactly. And then that itself is also an asset, which probably also has value much, later on. And yeah, that's a whole other different wormhole.
I think the biggest thing is that the fact that people are finding new opportunities to do business.
Right.
Is the reason why metaverse will flourish and engage people.
True. Could not agree more. Adnan, on behalf of the show, we would like to thank you for your time, for educating us and showing us what is possible, basically, in the metaverse. And this is definitely one of many conversations that we're going to have in the future. And we look forward to having you on the show. For any of our audiences who are interested in the metaverse, maybe want to reach out, share a couple of ideas with you, or just have a quick coffee, whatever it may be, what's the best way for them to find you and reach you?
Alan, first of all, thank you so much for having me over. It was great talking about the subject and meeting you in person once again. They can definitely just look me up on the website and reach me out through the landline number. And my email address is on it. So they can definitely shoot me an email. And I'll be more than happy to discuss more opportunities or just discuss the topic.
Awesome. And on that note, thank you very much again, Adnan. And we will catch you guys next week. Fellow aFormers, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for being part of our journey. And thank you for the immense support we've been receiving for our episodes. It has and continues to be a very bumpy road, but we wouldn't want it any other way. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought you value, please share this episode with anyone who may benefit from it. But of course, if you loved the episode, follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn, send us a little DM, and we may just send you a secret link to a secret episode which we've been working on. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. See you next time. Keep sketching.